Hey, welcome back to Big Bookie. Unfortunately, no Tyler today, so CEO here on the call, kind of mediating the show today. But this should be a quicker show since college football is kind of wrapping up. But we do have a massive Big Ten basketball slate this weekend. Lots of big non-conference games that could give the Big Ten a chance to kind of put their stamp on the nationwide picture. I know it's been kind of a rough start for the conference. We've had a few marquee wins and a lot of marquee losses, but lots of opportunity this weekend to potentially make an impact in the national landscape. We're going to be going over 6 games. We only have lines for 4 of them right now, given that lines for college basketball typically come out like the morning of. So we'll give our picks, but we don't have lines. But excited to dive into this. We can start off with we got a noon game. No line for this yet, but two teams that are kind of at the bottom of their respective conferences. So kind of the bottom of the ACC versus the bottom of the Big Ten. This game's going to be played at Penn State. The Nittany Lions are coming off of a big comeback win against Ohio State. And visiting them is the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, who have been very up and very down this season. They've gotten a few big wins and a lot of big losses, like much of the Big Ten. So we can start with you, Brandon. What are your thoughts on the Georgia Tech at Penn State game?
Man, Penn State really broke the Buckeyes' hearts on Saturday with that massive comeback win. I think the momentum's going to be staying with them this Saturday. Georgia Tech, we really don't know what we're going to get from that squad. And Penn State, they're riding hot, they're riding high. Hopefully they can pull that off into another win. I think the line will probably be close to a pick 'em, honestly, with these teams. Penn State, I'd play anywhere to -2, -3. And that's where I'm at.
Got you, Chris. Any thoughts here?
Yeah, I like Penn State here as well. I think Big Ten teams at home tend to be pretty strong. I know Penn State has kind of struggled up until that Ohio State win, but I think that's a big confidence builder for them. I know Georgia Tech has been very up and down this year, too. I know defensively they've struggled guarding against the three specifically. I know I watched Cincinnati shoot probably 70% from beyond the marker against Georgia Tech. So I would lean towards Penn State as well. Don't necessarily love this game from a betting standpoint, but if it is near a pick 'em, I would lean towards Penn State having good value there. I could see it being closer to like -3, -4, which at that number, maybe not as much value, but at a pick 'em, Penn State, I do like.
Yeah, I was gonna say I could see this even being like a -5 with them being home, and Georgia Tech on the road just is not the team you want to be betting on. So I think I'd play Penn State at -5. I mean, again, not really a game that many eyes will probably be on, and probably not one you have to bet on. But I wouldn't hate the value. It's going to be interesting to see what that line is. It's probably, I mean, Vegas hasn't put it out for a reason. It's kind of a tough one to guess on. But moving on to the next game, this is a big one. Two of the biggest brands in college basketball. One of them is probably a better team than the other. But when Indiana is playing in Assembly Hall, everyone shows out. One of the toughest environments, one of the biggest fan bases, maybe not one of the best teams. As we saw last weekend against Auburn, they kind of crumbled. But this Hoosiers team, they've got some pop to them. They've got some flair in the front court. It's going to be a good, interesting matchup with Khalil Ware against Hunter Dickinson there in the front court. Kansas is favored by 5.5 on the road at Assembly Hall. Chris, can you give us your breakdown? Where you leaning and
Yeah, exciting game here. This feels like a very sneaky trap line. I believe it's at 4 points for Kansas. I think Assembly Hall is a really tough place to play. I think people look at Auburn last week and maybe say, Auburn went in there, beat up on them. Maybe Indiana is not as tough this year as they should be, but Assembly Hall, nonetheless, difficult place to play on the road. Kansas has been really strong. Their only loss coming against a really good Marquette team. They shoot a lot of high percentage shots. They're shooting over 50% field goal from the year. So team that likes to play inside. They did struggle a little bit last week against Missouri, which maybe makes me a little bit hesitant, but it's really hard for me to bet against this Kansas team. I don't love laying the points at Assembly Hall, but I would lean towards Kansas. I don't know if I'll actually bet it. The bet I like the most here would be the under. I know the over-under here is at 147.5. I see Kansas kind of winning an ugly game here. I know last week the Indiana game kind of got out of hand. They gave up over 100 points to Auburn. I think a lot of people might look at the over, more of a public play. I kind of like the under here being a little bit of an uglier game. Indiana trying to control the ball more, see what happens as far as like being able to stop Kansas, control the ball, try to keep it close. So I lean towards that under at 147.5.
I like that. That's a good play. Yeah, Indiana's going to have to play some ball control to keep the ball out of Dickinson's hands because he can get nasty when he's got the ball. And dude puts up, he's a walking 25 and 13 every night. Brandon, where do you lean in this Kansas Indiana game?
Man, it is tough to go against the Hoosiers at Assembly Hall, but for some reason, I think the Jayhawks don't just win by 4-5. I think they win this game by close to double digits. I think Dickinson's going to probably be our player of the year this year going up against Edie from our Big Ten, but Dickinson's unstoppable. I don't think Ware is going to fare very well against him. And I think that Indiana, they just don't have it this year, at least at this point. We saw last week with Auburn just blowing the doors off of them. And I think Kansas is one of those top 4 teams in the country, and I think they are going to win comfortably.
Yeah, I like that play. I'm probably with you on that. Just Indiana's youth at this point in the season going up against the experience that Kansas team has. They've been successful for many seasons with guys like DeJuan Harris and McCullough. Dickinson's obviously a very experienced player. And when you're looking at Indiana, you've got some of the better players on the team. Ware, Mgbako, however you pronounce his name. They're all very young, not too much experience. I know the Hoosiers typically get one in Assembly Hall that maybe they wouldn't get on a neutral court. That could be this game. It could easily be a trap. But just looking at how these teams match up together, I think Kansas should take control of this game. But again, like you never know. It's college basketball. That's why we love it. Next game we wanted to look at here. We've got Baylor on the road at Michigan State. One of those most disappointing teams we've seen so far, especially looking at a team that was probably supposed to be at the top of the conference. I know a lot of you guys picked them as our preseason champion, probably hating that pick already, and we're not even out of December yet. It's at the point where they're not even favored at home against a team that they were ranked higher than during the preseason. Baylor is favored by 4.5 on the road against Michigan State. Brandon, would love to hear some more thoughts from you on this game.
Considering that I have the Spartans to win the Big Ten, I am not in love with that pick any longer. I will be honest with you. And like we said during football season, until the Spartans can show me they can cover a game and play well for at least more than one game, I think I'm going to have to fade them. And Baylor is looking really good this year. So I think we're going to have to go with the Baylor Bears on the road. Hate to do it, but Michigan State's got to show me something.
Yeah, exactly. It's you can't bet on these guys based on what you've seen for the past few months coming out of East Lansing. It's not been pretty for any Michigan State basketball fan. Chris, where are you leaning in this game?
Yeah, gotta lean towards Baylor as well. It's been Michigan State might be the biggest disappointment in all of college basketball this year. I've been shocked by how inept they've looked, and I think capping it off with losses to Nebraska and Wisconsin at home is they've been extremely disappointing. I know this game's actually not being played at Michigan State's campus; it's being played at the Detroit Pistons arena. And if there's one thing about that arena I've learned this year, is home teams do not win games there. So give me Baylor with the points. I think they cover pretty handily. Their scoring going to be too much for Michigan State to keep up with.
Okay, yeah, that's a good call out. I didn't even realize it wasn't in East Lansing. That makes me a lot more comfortable to lay the Baylor points. And I took Michigan State when they were at home against Wisconsin the other night. I thought they could maybe bounce back, but I was proven wrong. They're not a fun team to bet on unless you want to lose your money. So let's go Baylor 4.5. I like that play. Moving on to the middle of the day, we've got a nice neutral court game up in Chicago. We've got Ohio State and UCLA in that Champions Classic, I believe it is. Fun little rotating games between those two, and then UNC and Kentucky. It's been going on for a few years. But yeah, we got Ohio State, UCLA to kick that one off. The Buckeyes are favored by 2 points coming off that loss against Penn State. Chris, where are you putting your money?
Yeah, super difficult game to bet. I think UCLA's record is really kind of sneaky, worse than it should be. They had a 2-point loss to Marquette, lost by 4 to Gonzaga, had a close game against Villanova for the most part, and then kind of got away from them. Ohio State, after that Penn State game, struggled, but outside of that, they've looked really good. I think the last time I was on this podcast, I said I don't see Ohio State making the March Madness tournament. I don't see them being able to get over the hump. But then the big one against Alabama, and they've won some other games mixed in there. So I'm excited to see. This will be a great test for them. There should be a good back and forth game. This for me is kind of a sit. I don't have a lean on either side that I feel super strong about. I could see either one of these teams playing pretty well. I don't know what version of Ohio State we're going to get after a mentally defeating loss against Penn State. And I think UCLA is a little bit due to get over the hump, but I don't want to bet against my Buckeyes.
Yeah, very fair. It's a tough one. You're not wrong. Brandon, what are you thinking?
I know I've said I can't bet on the Buckeyes or against the Buckeyes earlier in the podcast, but I think this Buckeye team bounces back this weekend. I really think that the guard play is just far and away better than UCLA's, at least to this point in the season. I know UCLA has played the tougher competition, albeit they've lost those games. So I do think Ohio State wants to get that sour taste out of their mouth from that defeat at Penn State, and I think they come out firing early. And I will take the Buckeyes minus the points.
Good play. I'm going to be with you there on the Buckeyes. I know maybe a bit of a homer take, but that you hit the nail on the head with the guard play. I don't like what I've seen out of UCLA from the backcourt this season, and absolutely love Ohio State's backcourt. I think it's probably the best one in the conference, at least right now. So in that neutral court in Chicago, I think you probably see more Ohio State fans than you see UCLA fans up in Chicago. Probably not going to be a home court atmosphere given the Buckeye basketball fan base's existence. It isn't really there.
I was going to say the shot is in the home court advantage
The
either.
shot's not a home court. We're not making Chicago a home court, but at least it shouldn't be the same for UCLA either. Probably going to be a lot more North Carolina fans there than anything else. I actually went to this, like, we played North Carolina in this little series last year. It was up in New York. I went to the game, both games actually, because UCLA was playing Kentucky after. It was a North Carolina home game. It was insane. It was absurd. But yeah, blue everywhere. Roy Williams, they kept showing him up like on the screen, and I expect the exact same. It's going to be Carolina blue up in Chicago for this game.
I believe it's actually in Atlanta, Georgia, which I think even more so towards North Carolina. Yeah, I think this is going to be
okay. I completely missed on that.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then yeah. Chicago would have been maybe some Ohio State fans out there. We got a good alumni base out there, but yeah, Atlanta.
It's difficult.
Yeah, that's gonna be a Carolina crowd for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the Buckeyes in that one to bounce back. It's two teams who are kind of in need of a win, but I'm confident OSU just has the talent gap over UCLA, which is going to lean me into playing them there. Next up, we've got Arizona and Purdue, neutral court in Indy, although being in Indy, you're probably going to get a lot more of a Purdue crowd than an Arizona crowd. So essentially a home game, although it's not in West Lafayette. Brandon, where are you leaning for this game? This is a big one. Top 3 matchup early on in the season.
What a game we are getting in Indy, man. This is going to be a back and forth war. Do we have the spread on that yet?
We do. Purdue favored by 2. What I
Purdue
have.
-2. All right. I think, honestly, I'm going to be going with the Wildcats on the money line. Big thing for me is always going to be the guard play. I think Arizona's got at least a decently better guard play. I thought we'd see a lot more out of Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer this year with the improvements. I don't think I've seen enough yet to be able to go against Arizona's backcourt. And I think that Ballo, it's not going to be easy. It's Zach Edey. No one can stop the man. But I think he's going to do just enough. The guard play will do just enough. Arizona goes into Indy and gets the victory against the Boilermakers.
Interesting. I don't know if I'm going to have to ride with you there, and I'll give my analysis in a second. I know I've been kind of anti-Boilers this year, but this is one I'm going to take them. It's going to be a back and forth game. It's going to be a tight one. I'm leaning Purdue. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm leaning Purdue here as well. The one game this year we've seen Arizona somewhat tested and kind of brought to deeper water in was that Duke game. And I believe the biggest reason they were brought to deep water in that game was the Duke, just the larger players. And I think they've not seen anybody like Edey. They've not seen anybody under the rim that can play the way he does. I do expect this to be almost a home environment for Purdue. This is Indiana. I think Indiana neutral sites are different than the rest of the country. This state feeds off basketball. They're going to be there in support of Purdue. I think Purdue's going to play really well. I also think Purdue's just battle tested. These guys have played a really tough schedule to begin the year between the Maui Classic and then also just having some of these Big Ten games. I think the Northwestern game, if anything, was a little bit of a wake up for them. They've looked better since then. I do like Purdue to cover here and to win this game. I think they're going to come out and be able to do some stuff down the low that Arizona's not going to be able to compete with. Arizona would have to shoot really well with the guards in order to be able to keep up with them. The other play I like here is also another under. The over under in this game is all the way up to 160. I think it's going to rise even more before Saturday, as overs are a popular bet in college basketball. I just think that's really, really high for these two good of teams. I don't see them wanting to make this a track meet necessarily. I do think, although both teams, Arizona averaging 94 a game, Purdue averaging 86, they're high scoring teams. For whatever reason, I do see this going low. I think that's a really high total for a college basketball game to be able to lay. I like the under there, just banking on one of these teams to go on a little bit of a cold stretch at some point in the game to be able to get that under.
Yeah. The under is a good play. I think it's going to be back and forth, like Brandon said, but all you need is just a little cold stretch from somebody, and you're not getting all the way up to 160. It's a crazy high line. So I do like that. And I also am with Purdue. I mean, no one's been able to stop Edey. I don't think Ball is going to be able to do that. He's big at least, but I don't know if he can hold his own. You're still going to need to double team the man, and then he can kick it out. I know Brandon was kind of hating on Braden Smith, but that man kind of single-handedly carried Purdue over Alabama last week, and he was unconscious. He's been a different player over the last few weeks. And I think with him emerging, Purdue can really recapture that number one spot in the nation with a big win in Indy this weekend on Saturday. And then we got one more game on the slate for Big Ten. I mean, we do have Rutgers and Long Island, but Long Island might be the worst D1 team. So we're all going to ride with Rutgers there on this potentially 40-point spread. The other game we wanted to look at was Northwestern at DePaul, a little Chicago matchup. And the last time we saw Northwestern playing a Chicago team, it didn't go too well against Chicago State. So kind of ugly. We don't have a line on this right now. It's at DePaul. Not sure if DePaul has too many fans. I mean, you'll get the students out there, but not sure if it's much of a home court advantage. But Chris, what are your thoughts on this Northwestern DePaul game?
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how Northwestern bounces back. They looked so good. I don't know how you beat Purdue and then you lose to Chicago State, but they managed to do that. And really, that Chicago State game, they really lost towards the end. They were trailing the whole game. That wasn't like they snuck up on them. It wasn't a fluke. Chicago State beat those guys. So disappointing for the Big Ten to have that loss. I think they do bounce back. I think sometimes the losses like that are a big wake up for the program. I'm interested to see what the line is. It's hard to imagine that Northwestern wouldn't be favored at least. And I think Northwestern too might have a little bit of value baked into that, just with them coming off the Chicago State loss, people wanting to fade that after they didn't look as good. I don't think that's who Northwestern really is. College basketball is such a long season. I think you have a look ahead type game and you struggle, and that's frustrating. But I do think the DePaul should be a winnable game for them. So don't know what the line will end up being. I would imagine Northwestern might even be favored by 8, 7, we'll see. But I would lean towards Northwestern being able to win handily enough to where they're not fouling at the end of the game and like be able to have a big enough lead that 7, 8, 9 points. So I'd take it around there.
Yeah, I can see that line getting up really close to double digits, just the way DePaul's been this year. They're only a 2-win team. They've really struggled. And yeah, this isn't going to be a game where they're probably going to be competing, but I mean, you never know. We saw that Chicago State game last week. Brandon, any thoughts to wrap us up here on Northwestern?
Yeah, again, I think DePaul is probably the second worst team in all of the Power Six. And they played the worst team in Louisville last week, and they won by 7 points. But this DePaul team is not good. They're not going to compete with Northwestern. I think Northwestern wins this game very comfortably. Again, like I said with Ohio State, I think they want to get the sour taste out of their mouth, and they're just going to beat up on these guys. If that line is anywhere under double digits, I think it's a must take. DePaul is a horrible team, and Northwestern, like Chris said, is not just the team that just lost to Chicago State. They are a good basketball team. They beat Purdue, and I think they easily win this game by double digits.
Agreed. We've got a squad ride on the Cats this weekend. You know what that means. If you're tuned in, take out a little loan, toss it on the Cats, fade DePaul at all costs unless they're playing Louisville. Anyways, thank you everybody for tuning in. Hope you guys make some money with our picks here. Going to be a fun college basketball Saturday. Looking forward to it and looking forward to getting some more content out throughout the week as we kind of reach the peak of college basketball season going into conference play. A few more fun non-conference games, and then it's going to be full go on Big Ten. So it's going to be fun. This is honestly the peak of betting. I mean, right up there with college football, but nothing beats college football and college basketball betting. So we're going to have a lot of fun content for you all. Thanks for tuning in. We will catch you later.